Hi everyone, welcome to the second of our Bob Inc. podcasts. I'm delighted to be joined today by Sim, our acting chair within our ICB. We're going to have a hopefully excellent conversation about leadership and its highs and lows, and hear a bit more about Sim's leadership journey. So welcome, Sim.
Thank you very much, Philippa. Lovely to be here.
Yeah, you feeling okay about this conversation?
We'll see.
I'm sure it'll be excellent. So I'd love to start, if we can, right at the beginning. So we'll follow along the journey of your illustrious career, but really great to hear about you as a child and whether you thought about yourself as a leader as a child, or how did this journey start?
What did I want to be when I grew up? I didn't have a specific... I used to say to myself, I want to be something. And by that, I meant something big. But I didn't know what that was. I just a big
Prime Minister, perhaps?
I don't know. I didn't call it that. It was just big. But I had a lovely childhood. I grew up in a town called Taunton, which is in the southwest of England, in Somerset.
Wow.
It was amazing. I really enjoyed school. I loved it. I went to a huge international school where there were boarders and day people and all sorts. So I had what I didn't realise then was that I had a very global view growing up. Now, it could have been that I would have just been a very local girl growing up in a town, in a market town in Taunton, but it wasn't like that because school was a microcosm of the world. It was amazing. So I look back now and realise I was privileged.
Yeah.
I had a sense of what London would be like when I came to live in it. So I think that probably helped a lot looking back in terms of my worldview.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And was it when you were at school that you started to discover your interest in fashion?
Well, I am half Italian and half Jamaican. So my Italian side of the family, extremely well-dressed, and part of the culture of being Italian is about how you look and how you act and your sort of personal grooming. So it was natural. I had a grandmother who was always very glamorous, who was a seamstress, who was just made clothes all the time, made clothes for me. I had matching ribbons. So I don't think I stood a chance to actually, I didn't realise at the time, look at anything other. Yeah. So it became a natural part of me. I was always in my mother's shoes. She always had the latest things. We travelled a lot as a family when I was young. So I was exposed to a lot of that. So in a way, it was sort of natural that I might go into that. Even though I went to quite an academic school and the two didn't meet, I found myself in a fashion realm, if you like. Anyway, so yeah.
I actually went on holiday to Italy last year and felt the need to dress up every day.
Yes.
I was like, if you're going to walk around these beautiful cities and everybody is so beautifully presented, you need to really make an effort.
Exactly. And the Italians spend, more money per person on clothing than any other European sort of nationality. So it's really important. You do not step outside your door unless you're presented. Yeah. So it's just the Italian way, and it's lovely.
Amazing.
It's a part of my heritage.
Yeah, and Italian Jamaican heritage. Yes, that's two really strong cultures in your background,
and that makes for a unique mix. And I think when you think about people of colour, you think there are so many variations of everyone, and it really depends on how you've been brought up as well. So, it's fascinating, and I'm very, very proud of it, although it was very difficult growing up, because Taunton is a town where, I think me and a few other boarders were the only people that were a different colour. So, I had a double life. I had this very wonderful life at school where I was accepted and included, and then quite a difficult time in my hometown where I spat at in the street in my uniform, and as a child that's really difficult. And I remember there was a moment I was in the Brownies. I used to love the Brownies, but I went to Brownie Revels one weekend, and I remember we all had to stand in a circle and say our name. And all the names were Jenny and Jane and, lovely English names, and I was the only dark person in the room. And it came to my name, and I just wanted the earth to open up and gobble me up, because my full name is Simoniette. And of course, if you haven't heard that name before, it's quite different and a bit difficult, and nobody can say it and nobody can spell it, so I shortened it to Sim, and that's how I'm known now, and it's just easier. But I just didn't want to say that name. Imagine as a child being upset about your name and the colour of your skin and wanting to sort of scrub at yourself to be a bit whiter. So that's how I sort of grew up, but thank goodness I had the counterbalance of school.
Yeah, do you think that was conscious on the part of your parents to send you to a school where there would be that
absolutely.
diversity?
You've got it, in one, and that was my saving grace, if you like. Yes,
I have to say, Simon Yet's a beautiful name. I've never heard that before.
It's based on my mother, who was Italian. She's no longer with me. She worked in France for quite a lot as a francophile, so she spoke French as well. And so it's a Simonette is a French name, or Simonetta in Italian, and this with a G in. So that's my mum, ever inventive.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. And I think we'll come on to that theme a bit about how we sometimes need to assimilate with different groups, etc., and some of the ways we do that. But I think that's a really interesting example. So did you sort of have a strong desire to move to London after your childhood?
There was absolutely no way I was going to stay in Taunton, because it didn't offer me what the thing was, the bigger thing.
The big thing. Exactly. You're still waiting for your big thing.
Yeah, so I went I came to sort of uni in London and really never looked back. You know, it was the place I was going to be.
What did you study?
I studied humanities, but majored in French. So that's my sort of second language, if you like. But yeah, so I loved it. So I did a 4-year degree course. I ended up teaching as an assistant, an English assistant in France for a year, which was great fun. So graduated. And found myself with this sort of degree, but then got a wonderful opportunity to go and work in fashion.
Yeah. So how did that come about?
Well, things like this don't happen anymore, I think. But I was working in a restaurant, which reminds me of that song. But basically, and whilst I was studying, and into that restaurant used to come the buying director of the then Chelsea Girl chain of stores.
Oh, wow.
She used to bring her whole team for Christmas sort of, get-togethers and things like that. So over the course of the year, I'd be serving her. I was front of house in this restaurant, and she got to know me and got to know that I maybe was interested in fashion, but I never thought to ask her for any help. I was too green and too sort of not understanding the way the world worked, if you like. But I came to get a job. I found a graduate job in what was then Sock Shop. Young people won't remember that. And I remember telling her, and she said, "Oh, Sim, you must come and see me at Chelsea Girls." And I said, "Oh, how lovely, I'm going to get some advice." I went to see her, and she offered me a job. Wow. She said, "I've been watching you, I've been watching the way that you deal with customers, I've been talking to you, and I'd like to give you an opportunity to see if you could cut it as a buyer. So I'm going to take you on as a trainee buyer." And I was shocked. I didn't realise. I thought she was going to offer advice.
What an amazing champion to have.
So, and if I look back at my career, I've always been championed by other women, senior women. Some of the biggest moments, my sort of leg up and a foot up has come from senior women. So it's really important that, women help each other up that ladder, as well as people, who are different as well. Everybody needs a leg up or a door open. And she always said to me, and I'll never forget this, "I'm only opening the door for you. Once you step in, it's up to you to prove that you can do this or to show us that you're worthy." So, and that was a great challenge. Never looked back. I stayed there for 7 years.
Amazing. Yeah. And it's really important. Not everybody comes from that privilege where they could, have stepped in. I'm sure you wouldn't have applied for that job if you'd seen it in the newspaper or whatever. You wouldn't have been brave enough to do it. And actually, you need someone to help you sometimes if you're not coming from a background of privilege, and to give you that permission to try and give it a go. And
exactly.
How was the job? How did you find it? Did you find it challenging?
I loved it. It was at a time where high street fashion, because Chelsea Girl became River Island, the chain of stores that's River Island, and it was a golden time in high street retail. We travelled the world. I've travelled the world. The second, I think it was the third week I was in that company, they sent me to Hong Kong. Wow. And I just was besides myself with excitement. And that was so that I could learn and go with my senior buyer to understand how she conducted herself and work with a designer that we always had as well. How to negotiate, how to purchase cloth, how to read the market signs, how to, it was just amazing. And that was my sort of second, third week in that job. And then they told me I wasn't going home. So I had a moment, a bit of a strange moment where I was summoned to the buying director's suite in a very big hotel to be told you won't be going home. And I thought it was a punishment. I thought I'd done something awfully wrong. And she said, no, we've decided to send you to Taiwan and Korea. So I had this bag packed for Hong Kong, but I ended up going to those places as well. And I said, and my only response to her, how could I say this? I look back, but Beverly, I don't have any clothes. And she laughed her head off. You're in the right glass of champagne and said, darling, you don't have to worry about that. Just wear the samples from Tokyo. But the other buyer had been to Tokyo.
Wow.
And this was, so it's a bit of these things happened in those days.
Yeah, what an amazing story. I'm loving it. And what about that? You must have been doing quite a lot of cross-cultural negotiation as well, because I imagine the business rules in all of those different countries are subtly different, and you're picking up, how to communicate, how to do deals, etc.
Exactly that. If I look back, and some of the best relationships, I had brilliant relationships with the suppliers because we were all different, and you have to understand their point of view.
Yes.
It's all about compromise, and that's what I learned doing that job, that the give and take, and that if I squeezed them to within an inch of their life, when I came back next year to do the same sort of business, there would be nothing there would be no goodwill. So there was always that balance between pushing too hard, but always understanding the other side's point of view. It's that collaboration bit, it's that working together. And that was the wonderful sort of teaching that I had. And I learned the hard way, because as a baby buyer, you get the price, and you think, I've got the price, the margin's amazing. Yeah. But of course, at what price? And you've got to let the supplier come out with a feeling of, well, I feel happy about doing this business. He would then look after the consequence and the quality of what was being produced. So it was really important.
I find that fascinating in the context of what you're doing now as well. So much of what we're doing as a system is about working in partnership with others, and I love the idea that you can have been working in a totally different industry, a totally different sector, but building those nuanced skills that are going to enable you later on in your career to sort of work across different partnerships with different priorities, etc. It's fantastic. So tell me about that journey from learning these new skills to getting a bit more senior in that environment, and maybe, asserting yourself up into those management levels. How did that happen for you? Was it something that happened naturally, or did you have to push for it?
I think it happened naturally, because I loved the job so much that it was easy for me to go above and beyond.
Right.
And when you start going above and beyond, or working outside of your very close remit and thinking about creative ways of doing other things and being helpful and useful to the business outside of your own scope, is when you start getting noticed.
Yes.
And when you start getting noticed, then you start being encouraged to take on other projects. And when you take on other projects, you learn more. You make mistakes, but you have the support, and you work under the aegis of the powers that be. So you get recognised as someone that perhaps could take on more. And I think that's what I did, and that's how it sort of happened. I've never had to go and knock on someone's door and say, can I be promoted, please? I just thought, I love this, I want to do X, Y, and Z, and I can see ways to make some other things better that perhaps aren't part of my scope. So that's what I did. And it's easy to do when you love something.
Yes.
Because those things become very recognisable and very transparent. So you're able to grasp them and really sort of, work with them. So, but you've got to be you've got to want it as well.
I love that. One of my favourite books is by a guy called Gay Hendricks, who talks about the zone of genius and spending 80% of your time doing work that doesn't feel like work to you. You just love it so much, you just do it if you weren't paid. And I think if you can get into that space where you're doing work that just feels so natural and leaning into your skills as well, I think you're absolutely right. It sort of accelerates your development in so many ways, and you articulate that brilliantly. So when you were sort of getting into those leadership positions, I don't know what the fashion industry is like as a culture. Was it male dominated in those days? Was it accepting of new ways of doing things? Yes. What did you have to push up against?
Well, it was totally innovative. You know, we were always looking ahead. So I've grown up in an industry that only ever looked forward. So I'd be working on, say, 2 or 3 seasons in front of myself. So you had to get very good at, you either had to have an eye, what they call have an eye, naturally being able to spot things that go together, or being very observant. So one of the skills I have, and I didn't know then, was being able to pick up on things. So reading signals, having visual signals, verbal signals, looking at films and thinking, actually, that's quite interesting, or an old book that feels right again. So it's about being a bit able to pick up on the zeitgeist. And the culture of the fashion industry at that time, the high street fashion, was very female dominated, mostly women, but all of the exec and the senior teams and the owners of the businesses were men.
Funny that.
So we got, women were sort of at buying director level, and then senior management level, and then the rest were men, and that's the way it was then. So, there wasn't a thought that a woman couldn't do well in the fashion industry at the time, but there was a sort of a bit of a glass ceiling when it came to becoming the CEO or the MD. So yes. Yeah.
And just hearing about that kind of environment, it sounds like you had to be quite instinctive, but I wondered if that also required a certain level of confidence.
Yes.
So, if you're projecting into the future, you need to be able to bring others with you and convince them, no, this is the thing that's going to be fashionable. Did you feel confident? Is that something that you've always felt?
Yes, and my confidence I garner actually from knowing. So if you inform yourself fully about something, you're much more well equipped to be able to have that confidence, I think. So, I used to spend Saturdays in the shops. So either working in one of our stores or just trawling, looking at what people were wearing in the street. You have to sort of make sure that you're attuned to things, and do the groundwork, if you like, in order to give yourself the knowledge and therefore the confidence to be able to say. And then, of course, you look at history as well as a sort of a bit of a backdrop. So you look at the signals of lessons learned. So you use your lessons learned, what you're picking up, you triangulate to try and give you that confidence. And that's the same in most industries, or with most things that we do. But yes, there's got to be a certain amount of bravery. And of course, we made lots of mistakes. And if you made a lot of mistakes as a buyer, that costs the company a lot of money. So it was quite it was a very hard environment, because it was totally based on competence, making money.
That's interesting. It'd be good to talk about that a bit, because I think so you had to be confident, you had to make these calls, but you're not actually you don't have the gift of foresight. You will sometimes make mistakes. How did you sort of deal with that in your sort of earlier years, and what has that sort of taught you about managing failure or managing risk as your career has developed?
Well, I was exposed to more visible mistakes, I suppose, being in that job, because it was there for all to see. That thing that you said would work didn't work.
It couldn't work.
So all eyes, but what I learned was, if you get more right than wrong, and also some of the experiments that we did taught us and informed us about some of the pilots that we wanted to do. So there has to be a certain amount of failure in order for you to smell and be able to understand success. And you've got to learn from all those mistakes, and it makes you quite resilient. You've got to be quite resilient, actually.
But resilience doesn't come, it comes over time, doesn't it? I often think when people talk about experience, we want an experienced person to do this job. What we're really talking about is we want someone resilient who knows how to bounce back and has been here and done that. But it does take a while and a bit of a journey of self-discovery to understand your risk tolerance and how resilient you can be. So interested to hear a bit more about sort of the pinnacle of your fashion career. So
Yes.
where did your journey go?
So I worked for many of the best high street fashion retailers, some public companies, some private companies, both different cultures.
Right.
So really interesting. And what I ended up doing, I suppose, as you sort of follow the map, was I became the managing director of Miss Selfridge. That was a young fashion chain at the time, under the group umbrella of Arcadia.
I mean, that must have been a huge job. Miss Selfridge was huge, wasn't
Yes, and when I look back, not as big as Topshop, but I was one of 4 or 5 of managing directors, or brand directors we were called, that reported into the group board. What I realised is I was quite young for what I was doing. I was the youngest of the brand directors, and I, looking back, I realise that now. And actually, that was quite exposing. I had good support network around me, but I didn't sort of get it at the time. I was really young to be one of those. So, but I think that has helped me with where I am now, because I was exposed to a lot of hardcore. Philip Green was my boss, and exposed to a lot of behaviours that actually I wouldn't condone now, and I didn't, and also very, very pressurised environments, extremely pressurised environments. So, I was exposed to a lot as a young leader, which helps then with your sort of trajectory. If you can sort of experience and have those cuts, if you like, and those war wounds, it makes you a bit of a veteran.
Wow.
In your early days.
It's very impressive. And were there many other people of colour as well in that leadership cohort?
Not many, but there were some. Race wasn't we didn't see it as an issue. What was important was whether you could do your job.
Did you deliver or not?
Yeah. Can you buy more? Do you have an eye? Are you able to lead your team? Are you competent? Are you making money for us? It was very much that.
And was this around the time before? So we were talking earlier. We've both got 21-year-old girls. You've got twins. Was this before the twins arrived? How did things change when you were suddenly balancing family and this amazing work life?
Yes, they certainly did. It's quite interesting that you asked that. And having my girls, everything changed. The biggest sort of major point in my life, and it's very difficult for women because, of course, we have the babies, do we not? And if you're at the pinnacle of your career, you've got a choice to make. Now, we had nannies, I had all sorts of support, but at the end of the day, if you're not in an environment that suits and matches your values, and you've got your children, and you're battling with how difficult that is, that equals probably won't end up staying. And that's what happened to me. I stepped down in 2006, I think it was, from Miss Selfridge because of that. I just wasn't happy working for Philip Green anymore. And I had these wonderful children that I was not being with because I was being somewhere where I was unhappy.
It's really difficult, isn't it, just to get that balance right, and it can feel sometimes like you're never quite succeeding in the work, giving enough to work, and you're not quite giving enough to your children, but that's all part of the balance of it, I suppose. And I imagine your girls have really looked up to you in your career, and
they don't think I'm cool. Everybody else's children think I am, but not my daughters. But they're the opposite. They're not into fashion at all. They're much more academic, I suppose, and I've let them decide what they want to be and how they want to do it. I'm the guardian, if you like, of their helping and giving them the tools to be able to make up their own minds.
That's great. I'd like to do the pivot now. So I'm absolutely fascinated about this move you've made from being in the fashion industry to more public sector roles, and particularly in the NHS. How did that come about, and what made you want to sort of make that shift?
So looking back, and it's interesting. So what I've always done is maintained a position with only do what I really love. So the sectors that I move in or have moved in is because I want to be there. I haven't sort of just drifted into things. There's been a point, if you like. So actually, once I stepped down, from Miss Selfridge. It wasn't that I didn't love fashion. I had some time off with the children, which was amazing. As they were growing up, I knew I wouldn't have that time again. But I went into sustainable fashion. So I went into sustainable fashion. At the same time, I was asked if I would then morph into become a trustee for a charity. So I started to understand the third sector. And then a little bit later on, I was doing a fashion talk, Women in Fashion, at Coutts Bank, and I was spotted by the then chair of UAL, University of the Arts London, who asked the London College of Fashion Vice Chancellor, who had asked me to speak, who I was. Would I be prepared to come and have an interview to sit on the board, on the Court of Governors for the University of the Arts London? So when I thought about that, I thought, oh, I'm not equipped. But of course, my fashion background equipped me because, of course, within University of the Arts London, we have two finest, bestest fashion colleges in the world, Central St Martin's and London College of Fashion. So actually, there was a link, there was a joined up. There was something that made sense. Answered the question as to how that.
It's not a completely separate jump, is it?
There are strings attached which join it all up. So if I hadn't had the exposure to being a trustee in the third sector, I wouldn't have felt comfortable about then stepping into the role of a governor and sit on a court of governors in a higher education institute. So I understood about papers. I ended up chairing the charity that I was a trustee for a short time because the chair stepped down. So I learned a lot. Both in the Charity Commission and how to chair, and I hadn't come across any of that before. So that was the beginnings. And then, of course, one thing leads on to another. So I sat as a governor on the Court of Governors for University of Arts London for 11 years. And 2 of those, I was deputy chair. And again, that gave me another step up and a sort of a different exposure to then, understanding the role of chair and deputy chair. And that's how it sort of happened, that within I still have a connection to each of the sectors that I'm in. I love them, but everything's connected.
And I imagine you've learnt a lot about the culture of each organisation and how they differ in subtle and obvious ways. And I'm really interested in your observations about the culture of NHS leadership, and it feels like a very challenging time for the NHS, for the health and care sector as a whole, in fact for the whole of the public sector in many ways. But what are your observations as someone who's got this kind of huge depth of experience across different sectors about the sorts of challenges we're facing at the moment?
I just admire everyone who's working in the NHS. As you say, it's really difficult, but I don't think that some of the people that have worked here for a long time know how difficult the job is. It's almost as if they've become inured to the crises and to the pressure, and that's quite hard for me to watch because I'm thinking, no, this isn't business as usual and it shouldn't seem like it. So there's something about the NHS that sort of squeezes people a lot. So that would be my observation. I admire all leaders. But the other observation I have is in my other sectors, leaders had to take time out for self-development. That's one of the sort of things that the problem is with the NHS, it sucks up everyone's time to the degree that they can't take a step out and start reflecting on their own development. And if leaders are developed, they bring new skills and a fresh approach and a much more resilient kind of style to help all of their people. So actually, it's really important to understand the benefit and the need for self-development within our leadership culture in the NHS in order to feed back into the system. Because the challenges are so great and so vast that there needs to be almost modern, contemporary management skills in order to to cope with all of this. NHS leaders need to step out of the NHS and have a look at other sectors to see what they can glean to bring back in to help them lead the NHS. It's almost just the complexity is such that you need to have other sector experience as well, I think. And if not, that needs to be developed.
Yeah, I think that's really fascinating because it feels very relentless. It feels like a permanent crisis, and actually creating that space to step back is going to help you with your self-regulation. That's going to help you make better choices and lead your teams better. And I think we do have a responsibility to role model that to people in our teams as well, because I think everybody who comes to work in the NHS does so because they're passionate about making the NHS work. But actually, sometimes you have to sort of protect yourself within that stressful environment as well and create the space for you to develop. And that requires quite a lot of emotional intelligence too.
Correct. It's a bit of bravery because you have to step out and say, no, I can't do that. I need to attend to myself. But it's a bit like anything, really. It's like a relationship. They don't just happen. You've got to work at them. Relationship with your kids, relationship with your partners, with your family. They don't just happen. Effort needs to be put in. And it's just like you wouldn't dream, would you, of driving your car for 10 years without giving it an MOT or, and we do that to ourselves from a health point of view and a leadership skills point of view. So it's, I would be looking for leaders that understand that and that really do illustrate and role model how they develop themselves, how they look after themselves and remain robust.
And I think what you're talking about touches on a lot of the theme of compassionate leadership that people are talking about a lot more in the NHS. And I think we're sort of moving away from a leadership model which was more about that sort of top-down, national, local command and control to systems and partnerships and relationships and problem solving, which requires quite a different style, I think. And it would be just interesting to get your reflections on, that sort of shift in style and how we can support each other to do that, because it's not easy work.
No, it's really difficult and it's really complex. And it mustn't be underestimated, because otherwise you think you can sweep in and think, yes, using our old methods, we can sort this out. This is new. This is a new paradigm. And I think those leaders that are successful in the new world are those that stop and think, actually, I need to relearn. I thought I'd always been doing it in a really good way, but actually this is new and I need to step out and work out how to sort this out. It is different and it is new. So compassion and culture and cultural intelligence are really important. I know Michael West has done a lot of work at the King's Fund on this, and I don't think you can be a good leader in the NHS if you're not displaying those skills and you don't understand what that means. I don't understand, because everything's about people. We need to get the best value, we need to enable, empower our people in order to deliver under really difficult circumstances. So if you're not compassionate and inclusive and thoughtful and mindful and culturally competent, how can you do that? So I think, there's definitely something in that. And people talk about the soft skills. No, they may well be soft, but they're what's required at the moment. Culture is the biggest issue and challenge we've got in the NHS, as far as I can see.
I agree. And can we talk a bit about sort of diversity and inclusion in that context as well? Because one of the big strengths that I observe of the NHS is, if you look across its workforce, it's hugely diverse. And we are drawing on all parts of society, and like many organisations, that doesn't always translate into the membership of our boards. Nonetheless, we are pretty diverse, I think, here in Bob. But just welcome your thoughts on sort of how we build that into our approach to compassionate leadership.
Yes, and it's all about inclusivity. I find it really difficult when people talk about ED&I as a separate project or a separate entity. It's not. It's part of the culture. What's it like to work around here for everyone? So, if you're neurodiverse, what's it like? If you're a person of colour, if you're a black woman, what's it like? It's about inclusivity. So I think we've got a long way to go, but remember, the NHS Constitution is built on inclusivity. We've got the Equality Act. It's not as if we don't know what we need to be doing. And it's really important, first of all, to identify if there's an issue or if there are gaps or if there's a problem, and then work out what do people need in order to make a situation where we can talk about it? Because if we can't talk about it, we can't improve it. And if we can't improve it, we're in stasis.
And do you think we have enough of those conversations?
In some quarters, yes. I think those conversations are more easily had by some people. Other people are very uncomfortable to even talk about, race or something different. But if you don't ask, how do you know what's comfortable for another person or not? So have to ask. And it's about the bravery of being able to say, okay, I don't know if this is the right approach, but I'm going to try, and just work with that other person. How many of us don't have any friends that are neurodiverse or that are black or Asian? Or if you're always in an environment where you're with the same people, you're never going to learn anything. And sometimes you have to stop and think, oh, actually, yes, I'm not. So how would you know? In which case, how can you help? Everybody can help.
And thinking about what you were saying earlier about championing, and actually as leaders, we can bring people into the fold, can't we?
Yes.
I'm conscious of time. I could carry on with this conversation for a lot longer, but we're going to have to wrap up. I just want to say a huge thank you, Sim. That was absolutely fascinating. If you haven't written a book, you really probably should write a book, right? Really, really appreciate your time. And I'm sure that people are going to learn a lot from thinking about your leadership journey and what a fantastic journey it's been. Thank you so much.
Thank you.